Warhammer The Horus Heresy, Eidolon The Auric Hammer by Mark Collins. Chapter 14, Warp Song. Vociferon winced as he blocked another strike, driving the son of Horus back before ducking and sweeping his saber through his opponent's leg. The other warrior went to the ground in a rush of blood and a flash of exposed bone, grunting as he tried to push himself back up. Vociferon snarled, thrusting his other blade down and through the warrior's neck guard, feeling it grinding along his spine until he finally ended him. Blood streaked his armor, hot against the purple plate. He had lost count of the enemy he had personally dispatched. Most of them were mere line warriors. The worthy of the 16th were few and far between, their champions indisposed or already dead, a diluted showing. He had expected better. Of all the legions beneath the Warmaster's banner, it was Horus's own who held that fascination. There was an irony, he knew, in the relationship between the Emperor's children and the lunar wolves, who had become the sons of Horus. The former had learned at the latter's feet, watching the growing bond between their primarchs, Fulgrim and Horus, pupil and mentor, guiding the juvenile Third Legion towards maturity and excellence. Vociferon had often wondered how their philosophy had even been born there, let alone flourished. The Emperor's children had been mere foundlings, caught in the shadow of the Emperor's first found son, striving for perfection while attached to the armies of the most admired, the most perfect son. He turned aside another lazy blow. The air was hot, thick with ash and burning debris. Every strike seemed to move sluggishly in the kindling winds, pulled at by the sudden zephyrs that rose with their furnace stench. He could hear laughter on the wind, even through his helm, a whisper coiling at his soul, creeping up his spine. It flared every time he killed. Each blow that split armor and flesh, shedding blood and eliciting pain, made the presence stronger and more insistent. The battle thrummed through the ornamental square he was currently traversing, the dead at his feet and the enemy ahead of him. He struck back. A head spun free. He weaved and pivoted, driving his blades into an exposed back, bearing the sea-green figure to the ground. The weapons rose and fell, cutting and hacking, spraying him with blood until he looked more like one of Angron's broken berserkers. Part of him wanted to dive forward, rip the other warrior apart, devour him meat and marrow. Vociferon gritted his teeth and forced his way onwards, vaulting over a toppled statue. He had lost track of Eidolon in the madness of the melee. If he found the Lord Commander Primus, then perhaps he could outrun these impulses, the urges flooding him like some addled maniac, like Malachris. There were flashes of the other warrior, through the crowds and individual battles, flares of colour and the ostentatious crackle of his claws, gouging through whoever came his way, driving them to the ground with the same manic fury that had gripped Vociferon. No, not the same. Malachris and his men fought with an insane, furious intensity that made them beacons upon the battlefield. They burned with an unnatural light, as though reality was weeping around them, the immaterial bleeding through to catch upon the barbs and spurs of their armor. Again he laughed as he killed, like one of Khan's white scars. The lunatic joy that colored Malachris's movements was anathema to Vociferon, a cancerous outgrowth of their martial perfection. Yet the temptation was there. As much as they cleaved to the idea of the pure aesthete, the swordsman savant, there was a yearning to simply give in and yield to the Legion's ascendant humours. His skin crawled, his heart pounded. The all-consuming focus that had defined him was cracking, riven through with new sensations and fresher doubts. He could finally hear the warp song, the way Malachris or Plegua or the Lord Commander Primus must. More of the enemy were making themselves apparent now. Sons of Horus were flowing, their orders modified, their choler peaked. From the outer defense blocks and contracting lines of resistance, through the meager remaining Tetracholan forces and towards the third, true and open warfare raged about them, bearing down upon them in a storm surge of sea green, dappled with mud, blood, and ash. Vociferon watched towers torn apart around him, raining masonry down upon his men like burst seed pods, all forcing him to fight harder, to focus with absolute clarity on the individual battles that found him again and again. His sword arm was already wearying. He had killed so many. Blood soaked him, staining him red up to the elbows, whirled across his chest plate, coating the warped and ruined eagle. As tanks began to fire below, his eyes were drawn up to a fresh comet, scarring the heavens like the sweep of a god's sword. A ship was dying. Wounded engines holed through. It tumbled towards the earth. He could see ghost light dancing around its rear as the reactors detonated and the warp engines gave a final, spiteful spasm. The world swam and shuddered. shifting before his gaze as claws raked their way across the canvas of the reel. The savage joy clicked behind his eyes. At his back, all around him, it was as though he was back in the belly of the beast, assailed in the heart of the wage of sin, and this time he began to listen to the song's twisted rhythm. Malachus knew he had overcommitted, but he did not care, not now that the skies were burning and the true enemy had revealed themselves. The sons of Horus came at him in a tide, as though knowing they could not kill him alone. When bolt shells found his armor, it was a much more pleasant sensation than the weak offerings of the mortals. Malachus sprinted between burnt-out Imperial Army transports, turning and throwing himself down an improvised corridor. He moved through a burning doorway and straight into a shattered Medicae station. They did not answer him, though sometimes, when he caught the eye of one of them, he could see them laughing, silent and mocking, as if they knew that he would falter and die, begging him to fall at the hands of the sons of Horus. They were always your enemies, the voice had whispered, reassuringly. You did what was right. You took your fate by the throat, as all must, as we soon shall. There were times when the Lord Commander's admonishments fled his increasingly addled mind, and he could not remember that the voice was not his. That had mattered once. Now it was nothing more than another dull refrain, next to the call that spoke to his soul. Riken Bale kept trying to raise him, but the voice distorted in the vox, his ardent pleas melting away into so many enraptured screams. He blocked him out. Vociferon's clamour for attention or orders or support had faded alongside them. He was too busy for that. Malachus felt the world convulse around them and laughed, feeling the air shift with fiery certainty. He bounded up a set of ruined stairs, taking them 3 and 4 at a time, leaping over gaps and rounding the corner. Upwards, the better to see the world as it died and was remade. The enemy's fire chased him. Bolt shells missed by mere degrees. Plasma bursts were a crawling fire at his back. The armor systems were howling in his ear, overloaded, ruptured in multiple places. None of it matters, he growled. There is only the moment. Only the moment, the voice agreed. Soon, very soon, you will have your chance to serve. All will serve. And when Malachus emerged out onto the 3rd floor and saw the roaring fire in the sky, blazing forever against the rising smoke and the harsh exchange of artillery and shot, he knew. This was the beauty in the war he had been craving all along, something sacred. He threw himself off the edge, landing in the midst of the sons of Horus who hunted him, robbing their heavy emplacements of their ability to fire. His claws were a blur of killing steel, blazing as they drove through the gorget of a sergeant bearing down on him. The enemy swarmed him. Daggers and swords bit against his armor. He felt an axe blow scar across his reactor housing, and then spun about, taking the warrior's hands in tribute. From out of the ruins, Riken Bale found him at last. More of Malachus's bloody-handed monsters were with him. Ophir Damascus from the assault cadres hurtled through the air on flaming jet plumes, landing amidst the enemy and lashing out with twin hand axes. He sang as he killed, driving one Chthonian down and stamping on his throat, even as he pivoted to stave in another skull. Aren't they beautiful? They could be so much more. Slick with blood, laughing with the sheer joy of the slaughter, feeling the dying ship above as it gouged into the world's tormented soul. Malachus finally understood what it meant to surrender. The Vox was screaming, useless, awash with static and feedback that made his ears ache beautifully. The howls of a dying world were amplified and exaggerated. All across the city, the forces of the 3rd Legion were riotous and untamed, rising to the challenge of the sons of Horus with vicious aplomb. Vast funeral pyres of dead mortals had been set burning where they had not been reduced to raw psychoactives. Amidst it all, brother fought brother. The air was alight, burning with potential coiled through the acrid corpse smoke and chems. Everything was sharpened down to the moment, to the glorious instant, pared back by the knives of gods and monsters, exposed to the open air so the nerves could sing. Tetracala was a pinned beast, dying about them, a single point of absolute indulgence. The world howled. It pulsed like a beacon, so potent and primal that even Lorgar's dying storm would feel it, be drawn in, and wreathed about it. The galaxy was still wounded, the lifeblood of the warp still smeared across the canvas. Even as it waned, it could be directed and teased to their will. The world was saturated in the Empyrean, drowning slowly in cosmic malice. Before Istvan, such thoughts would have been insanity itself. Before Laren, they had inhabited a godless cosmos. Now there were patterns carved into the heavens, and the destiny of the human species lay in the talons of laughing, thirsting gods.
Let the world die. Let the enemy be dashed upon the rocks of their own failings. Let them join the dead of the Coral City in the Dropsite Massacre.
Eidolon had grown weary, starved of a challenge as the Sons of Horus tried, again and again, to end him. Futility. It was all futility. Greater beings had tried and failed. Even Fulgrim's mania had faded, replaced with the fateful orders to Fabius.
Was it your hand that shaped that fate, Father? Did you spare me? Or did the Dark Prince whisper with your voice? By whose hand am I kept alive?
His vigour had outstripped his fellows. They had been left behind, almost forgotten as he pursued the foe into the ruins. He had lost count of how many had fallen by his hand. The layer of greasy ash clinging to the hammer's haft the only indicator. The fighting was somewhere behind him, yet he knew his path lay ahead. The fortress was a broken edifice now, a child's toy smashed to fragments in a fit of pique. The walls had tumbled, ruined masonry littered the courtyards and grand processionals. Defensive emplacement lay shattered alongside the bodies of the defenders and invaders. Garrog waited at the centre of it. Within, the strategium tables lay broken, but it remained as it had been. The nexus martial of the great fortress had been a place of planning and preparation, slowly being eaten away by the Imperium's dire logistics. Sheaves of burning parchment blanketed the floors, spread from desks and file nooks. Vast pillars carved with dead heroes from ages past had toppled piecemeal. Their great carcass sprawled alongside the surviving examples, with benches of mosaic tiles crushed beneath their bulk. Axe already in hand, Garrog surveyed the ruin with a sneer, then turned his casual disdain upon Eidolon. He snorted and smiled at the Lord Commander Primus.
It didn't have to be like this,
Garrog said as he began to advance on Eidolon, turning the axe over in his fist.
You forced this confrontation when there was no need for it. As though it was not on your mind the entire time.
Eidolon laughed, and the shattered fortress rang with the manic resonance of his bemusement.
It was always going to be this way. In every war, and every battle we have ever fought, the seeds were there.
He swept the crackling head of Gloria Eterna around and pointed it at Garrog.
You are not the great nor the gifted, simply who the gods decided would be here. And so here we stand. I as an exemplar of my legion, and you, the best your legion has to offer me right now.
Do you think you can shame me? Garrog shouted. It was circumstance alone that threw us together, not the will of the gods.
You deny your sins, then?
Eidolon asked.
My sins? You brought this squall upon us. You called down the warp, bound its minions, and set it against me. You coiled it through my ships and brought us low here.
Are you so addled that you think that even possible? We were warp-lost, marooned. I'm no conjurer, Eidolon. I can't and wouldn't make the warp dance to my tune.
Who else?
You have enemies aplenty, within and without. Why should it be I who panders to the paranoia of a broken mind? Eidolon snarled and his arm snapped, pistol readied. A beam of focused atomics spat forward, narrowly missing Garrog as he hurled himself aside. Eidolon let the pistol drop again and strode towards the praetor, hammer already swinging. Their weapons met in a clash of energy, driving the lighter-armored Garrog back a few steps. Eidolon seethed.
I'm not broken.
Garrog spun away and swiped at Eidolon, the axe cleaving at his armoured flank. Systems whirred and screamed at the contact, forcing the Lord Commander almost to one knee. He rallied, strength born of pain flooding through him. His armour hissed as it pumped his bloodstream with combat stims. Pale skin reddened and pulsed, his teeth ground and gnashed. Moment to moment, he felt he would either seize or foam at the mouth. Fabius's gifts were barbed things, swords that cut both ways. Every advantage counted, every moment was a precious thing. Blade met hammer with another burst of thunder and lightning. A shockwave of displaced air surged between them, almost bowling both of them over. Both warriors strained against the other, forcing themselves forward. Weapons locked. Garrog kicked out and Eidolon scampered back, looking around only as the blade swung for his distended, trilling throat. Memories flashed before his eyes. Sweep of Fulgrim's sword as it took the Gorgon's head. The same flawless gesture as he ended Eidolon's life for the first time. The beauty of it, the sublime and all-consuming joy of it. Despite the dark allure of it, the memory of the revelatory blade. He would not cross that threshold again. He was the reborn. The thought slowed his reactions, reducing his blows and parries to a languid smear of motion. Eidolon grinned, lips spread wide in a sudden burst of amusement. That made Garrug's eyes flare with anger. The warrior came at him again, every iota of speed and skill forced out to try and end Eidolon. He swung his axe two-handed, and Eidolon weaved to the right, driving in at his flank. The hammer cracked the breastplate of Garrug's armor, staggering him. He spat blood and snarled. Eidolon looked at the broken eye of Horus upon the other man's chest, the cracked ruby-red seal almost weeping stone shards and molten red gold.
That there is the god you have put your faith in,
Eidolon said.
You have faith in your War Master. Yet what does that leave you? All I need to believe in is my skill. I know that I am superior to you, Garrug. You are a hollow thing. Oath to Horus's shadow, dying where your master will never know you trod.
Don't speak his name, Garrug hissed, breathing blood. He spat it out onto the broken tiles of the floor. You were always delusional hangers-on, too weak to honor his vision, too mad to know when to lie down and die.
Vision? Eidolon said mockingly. We follow your empty and addled king because it will lead us to the glory of the confrontation. The day of the turn has come and passed. Ulanor lies behind us. The only true triumph lies ahead now.
He paused and his tongue lapped at his teeth, tasting the victory to come.
But as our grandsire shows us, nothing is forever, least of all a reign.
Ships were fighting and dying above them. Gunships and fighters dulled and danced through the lightning-tormented skies, while beyond them fought the monstrous vessels of the fleet. Eidolon's fingers tapped along the length of Gloria Eterna's haft, picturing the frantic crews as they rushed from station to station, joyous and ecstatic to be challenged at least. The same elation flooded through him, and atrophied muscle and pitted bone sang with the same beautiful frenzy. He swept the thunderhammer around, streaking the air with lightning, driving his enemy back. Even as the Chthonian fought him with brutal desperation, each blow was met, soaked or parried by the barbarian's axework. He was good, and Eidolon had to give him that. He fought with a compelling fire, a passion that burned and bled through his skin. When Garrug moved, it was with the furious intensity of an assault cadre, striking swiftly before retreating. Blood was leaking from his breastplate, soiling the sea green. It misted from between his lips, forced out and aerosolized with every halting breath. Yet he fought. He fought to defy Eidolon and the whole of the Third Millennial. A warrior who would rather die than surrender. The tip of the spear thrust towards the heart, even if he broke in the attempt. Eidolon took the punishment. Blow after blow. Ruined and melted gold spun from his pauldron. Ceramite cracked and shattered. The air was filled with sparks and shards. He pushed into it, through it, taking each and every blow. His breastplate split, his side opened. Eidolon spat blood into Garrug's eyes. Defiance, unshakable and unbreakable defiance. Never giving the enemy the satisfaction of his fear or pain. Pain was an offering, given up to the Dark Prince and the Primarch, sweet and sharp as wine.
Is that all you have?
Eidolon slurred.
The vaulted sons of Horus, the War Master's finest. Show me that Chthonian steel. Come on, savage. Impress me.
Garrug snarled and bounded forwards, axe raised, bringing it down in a sweeping overhead swing. Eidolon twisted to the side and hefted his hammer up, bringing it round and impacting Garrug's side. The warrior staggered and Eidolon followed. Another blow cracked Garrug's left pauldron. He went to one knee, holding his axe up in vain, struggling to repel Eidolon. The Lord Commander Primus looked down at the son of Horus, his face twisted in beatific hatred. Eidolon twisted the hammer round and brought it down hard into the praetor's face. Flesh atomized as it hit the power field, bursting apart in a cloud of ash, and the legionary's smoking skull detonated, blowing apart in a cloud of bone and dust and brain matter. Around them, reality quivered. The taut skin of the materium undulated and rent. Eidolon spun about, confusion writ across his face as the world began to burn and turn upside down. He fell. The last thing the warriors of the Third Millennial were aware of was the rush of sudden fire and screaming from the immaterial host. Light rose to eclipse the night, drowning even the greatest of conflagrations beneath its questing power. It clawed at the sky like the finger of an angry god, resonating with all the madness and beauty they had been promised. like a comet tearing its way skywards, made of an inferno beyond the world, it screamed into the heavens, and all who looked upon it screamed with it, in song and rapturous surrender. I have spoken, again and again, about perfection and the vaunted pursuit of it. Others, my brothers amongst them, tell me that it is but a fanciful dream, that nothing save our Father is truly perfect. I say to them that anything is possible. If we fight for it with our very heart and soul, yes, I say soul, I do not give credence to spirits or afterlives. Instead, I only offer this. We are the heart and soul, the core of both Legion and Imperium. Only by embracing that duty can we lead our species and culture to a state of perfection. A galaxy made whole and an empire without end. Without that conviction, we are nothing. Without that shining soul, we shall not merely fail, but fall. Primarch Fulgrim, recorded in remarks to the Brotherhood of the Phoenix. End Act 2. That felt so dramatic. My word. That felt so dramatic and intense. I loved the way that was written. That was just... It just kept going from one bit to the next, and it just... God, it was so good. That's probably been my favourite chapter so far. It truly felt chaotic, and yet directed. It felt furious and incredibly well-paced. It was fascinating seeing the effects of the warp and the influence of demons on the different legionaries of the Third. It doesn't seem to be affecting the Sons of Horus much, but I wonder if there's probably a reason for that we haven't explored. Or maybe it's just because they're not point-of-view characters, so we haven't really gotten to see it. But I thought it was fascinating. I am curious to see what happens to Vociferon, because I don't think he's going to hold on anymore. And I think nothing is going to be worse than someone who has been hyper-disciplined and hyper-restrained, and then suddenly the mask slips and he's no longer holding back. I think he's going to be the best of us. He's the best of the Legion. He's an example of the best of the Legion who is about to fall and become the worst of the Legion. And I think that's going to be... The way Mark Collins writes, I think that's just going to be really delicious to explore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I loved this book so much. Please do like, share, subscribe if you want more. Mostly like and subscribe, please. Please, please. Because most of you people listening aren't subscribed, and it's just really nice, because then you don't miss any chapters. Then again, they are all in playlists on my channel, so you know you can always go back and find a thing. You should probably see it at the end of the video on the little buttons that come up on the screen, probably about now. Anyway, thank you so much for choosing to hang out, spend your time with me. I hope you like the reading. The next chapter will be up soon. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next time.